talktainmentradio.com.
We give you a reason to come.
The world's greatest radio.
We give you a reason to stay.
Radio the way it should be heard.
You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and not necessarily those of talktainmentradio.com, 3MR Production, its ownership, management, or staff.
We've got the power.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on talktainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Well, this is The Compensatory Concept. I'm Brother Kahari, sitting in every week with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on talktainmentradio.com, radio the way it should be heard, the world's greatest radio, the impactful sound. Oh, my goodness. Let's, first of all, I think we talked. Mr. Fuller, how are you, sir?
I'm still learning.
Ms. Fuller, have we talked since the verdict, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there have been some activities called for. Stevie Wonder, the recording artist, said he wasn't going to go down to Florida anymore. Jesse Jackson said something very interesting, and I want to kind of work off of this, if you will, Mr. Fuller. He said that Florida was the apartheid state, and I'm kind of that's an interesting phrase, apartheid state. Mr. Fuller, let me get your thoughts on all of this. It seems to be maybe a little bit of awakening happening. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I hear more people just on the chatter, just as you go around and you hear conversations, there seems to be an awakening. Something seems to be stirring out there. Now, what that means and how it's going to be directed, I don't know. But to hear somebody call a whole state of the union an apartheid state raises questions in my mind. When you heard that, Mr. Fuller, I don't know if you've heard it, but if you're hearing it from me for the first time, it's been reported widely in the news. Let me get your thoughts on this notion of an apartheid state, Mr. Fuller.
Well, I don't know exactly what it would mean within the context that you just said it, because according to counter-racist logic, the person who makes the statement would be the person who would be logically the person to explain the statement. And so I couldn't explain someone else's remarks. But when I think of an apartheid state within a racial context, I think of the entire system of white supremacy worldwide in all areas of activity, 24 hours a day, in every area of activity that motivates the people on the planet.
Uh-huh.
And that would consist of economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And the people who believe in, I'm not talking about all white people, but I'm talking about the most powerful and the smartest white people who believe in the system of white supremacy, are dominant over the non-white people in all of these areas of activity for the sake of mistreating them and dominating them for fun, glory, and material gain. And that is the system that is in place. It's the strongest government, the strongest political system, the strongest religious system on the planet as we speak right now, in my opinion, and according to the evidence.
I tell you what, let's take a listen to what Reverend Jackson actually said, and this is from a live CNN interview on something called the National League.
Founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Reverend, thanks for joining us. You heard Trayvon Martin's mother there, Reverend Jackson. What do you want President Obama to do now?
Well, he certainly has the Attorney General actively involved. As the heat keeps rising on this crisis, Trayvon is a symbol of a deeper malady. It's Trayvon in Florida is Oscar Grant in Oakland. It's Diallo in Chicago, in New York. And at some point, Eisenhower had to step in against his desire in Arkansas. Kennedy in civil rights, and Johnson on the Voting Rights Act. At some point, the president must offer the moral leadership he has to offer. I think he's been actively involved, but I think the heat will continue to rise.
What will you do if the Department of Justice decides not to file federal charges against George Zimmerman, as you and others, the NAACP and others, have called on the Justice Department to do? What would you do then? Would there be some action by Rainbow Push?
Well, we think that the Department of Justice does have an action that it should pursue. I think there'll be civil suits filed. That is another action. No doubt the request to the inclination to boycott Florida, to stop conventions, to isolate Florida as a kind of apartheid state, given this whole stand your ground laws. Homicides against blacks have tripled since this law has been in existence. Now, more homicides and more guns make us less secure. And so that will be all, and I hope all the action remain disciplined, dignified, and nonviolent, because if they ever become violent, it shifts the sympathy from Trayvon who deserves it to Zimmerman who does not.
Okay. Neely, after having a chance to hear what Jesse Jackson said, is that making any clearer to you about what he is referring to as an apartheid state?
Yes, it's very clear to me. I mean, as far as the context in which he just presented it, he mentioned several other places. I think he mentioned New York City. He mentioned Little Rock. He mentioned even going all the way back to the Eisenhower administration. Is that correct?
That is correct.
If I heard correctly. Mm-hmm. So he's talking about many different incidents that has the same pattern, and that kind of reiterates what I said before. But I take it farther than that. I'm talking about worldwide, even as we speak. And I'm not talking about incidents. I'm talking about a system of racism in every area of activity 24 hours a day. It dominates everything that people do all day long, wherever they are on the planet. It's the biggest issue that there is. Conflict about what color somebody is. This is what the system of white supremacy is all about. It's a generated conflict. It's an invented conflict. And it has dominated everything. It still does. And so there's no such thing within that context as a racial incident. It's all racism. Every bit of it. Everything that everybody does all day long is all about racism. Every bit of it. And if it's not looked at it that way, there's no way to solve the problem. It has to be looked at that way. And what President Obama does or doesn't do is not the decisive thing. What he says about it. He is classified as non-white, which means he comes under the system of white supremacy. He's not outside the system of white supremacy. He is a victim of white supremacy. He's the person who's chained at the bottom of the slave ship. He might be allowed to go up on deck and operate the helm, but the ship is still a slave ship. It doesn't make any difference who's there at the helm. The captain of the ship is somebody who's going to always be, as long as you have the system of white supremacy, always be someone who is classified as white and or who functions as white. That has to be understood. If we don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. I stick by that statement. There's no way to make sense of the entire world without understanding the system of white supremacy as a world system, 24 hours a day. There's no such thing as a racial incident here and a racial incident there. It's all racial, every bit of it. It's nothing that you're looking at every day, walking down the street, that's not racial. Nothing. Everything is racial. Race up under the hood of the car, race up around the corner, race down in the basement. Everything is racial, now, whether you see it or not.
Now, Mr. Fuller.
You might be looking at it, but you might not be seeing it.
Right. Now, Mr. Fuller, someone hearing that would say, now wait a minute. Now, are we having a phobia about race here? But what do you mean when you say race is everything? Let's we're in a court of law here. You made a statement. Now, how would you put forth your evidence to substantiate what you just said?
Because color is the first consideration when you start talking about people walking around on the planet. And the people who make the decisions on what a person of color is going to do or not do any minute of the day is in the form of a white person, a person classified as white, who has animosity toward people who have color. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having all these conversations about color, which is now being asked for again on account of a so-called racial incident, the Trayvon Martin incident. Many people are going around saying, well, let's not make race out of it. I mean, it's a lot more factors here involved in that. It's poverty, it's schooling, and all like that. That's all within the envelope of racism, every bit of it. And people will say, well, it's not, you can't make everything race. Well, who can't? Who can't make everything race? It's already been done. This is why you have all of these conversations and you keep having commissions and whatnot every decade or so, and you keep having, people looking into words like apartheid. There's on the front page of the Washington Post this morning in 2013 talking about the people in South Africa, the white people who are in enclaves. And that is a headache for a lot of people because they say we're supposed to have a free South Africa now where apartheid is gone. But you have white people in South Africa who are saying, well, when you deal with these black people, they're not good for nothing but making crime and hostility. And we want our own enclaves here in South Africa. That's the Washington Post on the front page as of this morning, and this is 2013. And what many people are going around fabricating a term called post-racial. I don't know what that means. Someone will have to ask them, the people who use the term, because I don't see any signs of that. Zilch. None.
So you're saying that from where you sit, nothing essentially has changed except the appearance of things changing.
Now you see it, now you don't. We're now in the refined stage of white supremacy, according to what I've written in the basic textbook for victims of white supremacy. And that came out a long time ago. It goes through 4 stages. Establishment, that's getting it started. I'm talking about the system of white supremacy, that is. Everything starts somewhere. So it was established a long time ago. And then they maintained it. That's the second stage. Once you establish something, you try to maintain what you have deliberately established. Then you go to the expansion stage, meaning just like in any business, you try to expand your business once it's off and running, once you're able to maintain it. Then you look around and say, now, how can I improve my business? If you're in the business of racism, you want to improve the business of racism. So you expand it by taking in more people. If the practice of racism requires people, and it does require people, like a plantation owner, you might say, takes in more slaves in order to expand the operations of the plantation. Expand the profits that you get. All right? Then you go to the refinement stage. That's the last stage. Put the finishing touches on everything. Get a better neon sign out front of the business. Paint the barn, maintain the tractors. Get better plows and horses and whatnot. I mean, if you're going to use a plantation-type setting. See, that's what you call refining it. And even, you might say, buy some new clothes, winter clothes, for the slaves, because you want to keep your stock healthy, so they'll get out there and do more work, more efficiently. Because you don't want them sick, just like you don't want your horses and cows to be sick. I mean, that's bad for business. That's not good profits. So the system of racism works on the same basic business principles as any other business.
Well, I pulled up that article you're talking about in the Washington Post, and the comments below it are quite interesting. Here's one person that says this. This is a guy named John Borg who said, "I think this is fine. The subtlety of the story is missing. After living there 3 years, here are my comments." He says, "South African housing is completely segregated, much like the U.S. in the 1950s. The main thing is that in most communities, there's a possibility of mix. I've lived in gated community." That's that word, gated community. That's a code. I lived in gated community near Cape Town, and that was pretty much white. I did have a handful of black residents. So what he's basically saying is that even with a country that's 80%, an area of the world is 80% black, there's still large, the two races are not living together. I mean, he's saying it's just like the 1950s.
Not only that, but in that same article, I think it says, if I read correctly, in answer to the question, who's running everything that's worth anything? It would be the white people in South Africa.
Well, let me read some of it. Let me see if I've got it right. It says, and I'm picking up on it, it says, as Nelson Mandela, the country's first black president, battles a serious lung infection, many South Africans are examining whether their nation has lived up to its vision of equality, engaging in conversations about race, politics, and the economy. That has drawn new attention to the all-white communities and the festering legacy of apartheid. To blacks, Ken Fondon is a remnant of the painful past, a gated community of whites determined to perpetuate racist apartheid practices. It just goes on from there. But yeah, you get it is a fact that the black businesses in an area known as South Africa do not run the economy. I mean, there's no illusion about that. That's a fact. They're nowhere near running an economy down there. All of the major corporations in South Africa were white-owned and still, to this day, are white-owned, white-controlled, white-run, white-dominated. Mr. Fuller.
And right here, I mean, the recent news saying that a city like Detroit has gone bankrupt. And what do they mean by bankrupt? When you go there, who do you see? In a place that's all decrepit, a place that's all boarded up, a place that's devastated, a place where trash is not collected and whatnot. I mean, who are the people that you're looking at? What do the people look like? Well, from what I've heard, I haven't been there, but I've heard, the people are black, and they are devastated. They are down and out, and the white people are moving out, and naturally, anywhere in the world in the system of white supremacy, the pattern shows whenever white people move out, everything of value goes with them. And all that's left is a bunch of tattered rags and raggedy streets and street lights that are burned out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The grass begins to die. Everything begins to decay. Everything becomes boarded up. Black people walking around like zombies. This is what you see. And now, is this the result of vibrant, industrious black people on the move, building skyscrapers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or is this a result of a system that's in place that guarantees it's going to happen? Now, I'm taking the position that it's the latter. Now, there are other people, and little by little it's becoming dangerously close to the Hitler-type talk, and that is, oh, no, it's not because of white people oppressing black people. It's because black people are just genetically inferior, and anything that they touch will die.
It's creeping. It's creeping in that direction. You're absolutely right. Stay right there, Mr. Fuller. We've got more to come because we're looking at, I'm just happened to think about what Mr. Fuller said, and I'm looking down even in Lima, Peru. In Lima, Peru, a place you don't even hear about. Black people are suffering very, very hard racial times down there. We'll get into that, get more into Detroit, more into South Africa, more into the compensatory concept. Stay right there. More to come on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio the way it should be heard.
This is Satin, your MC host for the 7th Annual African Village Arts Festival. This is a 3-day village type event that starts August the 16th, 17th, and 18th in Columbus, Ohio. We are calling for artists, sponsors, vendors, and volunteers. This festival is sponsored in part by Ohio Alliance for Arts Education. Please call 614-252-7525 or 614-252-2430 or email us at info@galleryinthehood.com for more information. See you there.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
TalkTainmentradio.com. Food for thought.
I guess it's time for us to have that talk with our children on how we should carry ourselves and act in public. If ever there is a feeling of uneasiness about a situation or a feeling that something is not right, we should try to exit the area immediately. And if threatened, call 911. Back in the day, parents routinely had that talk, and I guess those days never really left us. I spent my younger years in Sanford, Florida. It was segregated then by law, and it still seems to be in some situations and with some people. I remember family members routinely having conversations on how to act and react in public. Sadly, those conversations need to continue.
That's another food for thought. To hear additional food for thought, stay tuned to TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard.
Richard Holt, research chemist, University of Rio Grande in southeastern Ohio. With your skin, you can see your condition. People always wonder how they get it. Don't worry about what you can see, worry about what you cannot see that can cause your condition. Environment, pollution, affects your skin. Richard's Remedy is a multi-purpose cream that works on a variety of skin conditions, such as psoriasis, eczema, poison ivy, acne, poison oak, and Morgellons disease. I sell it in a 1-ounce container through the internet for $12.95. There's Visa, American Express, MasterCard, Discover, Money Card, accepted. At richardsremedy.com. Richards with an S, remedy.com. RICHARDSREMEDY. richardsremedy.com.
Call 937-607-4259 or go to email info@talktainmentradio.com for a free sample of Richard's Remedy.
Are you a minority or women business owner looking for a great resource for your business? Well, you can stop looking. MBE Magazine is the one for you. MBE Magazine has been a national resource for minority and women business owners for almost 30 years. No one supports and understands you like MBE Magazine. Visit them today at www.mbemag.com to subscribe to the digital or print version. MBE is a proud sponsor of the Exceptions to the Rules radio show.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
We've got the power.
Justice is better than racism.
This is the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard, the world's greatest radio. I'm Brother Kahari, sitting in every week with Mr. Fuller. You can get Mr. Fuller's two works, his two books at www.producejustice.com, www.producejustice.com. Mr. Fuller, as we look at racism around the world, Jesse Jackson called Florida an apartheid state. Mr. Fuller is saying that racism is all over the world. That's what white supremacy means. It's worldwide. I'm just looking at something that's taking place in a place that nobody ever talks about, Lima, Peru. Now, for those people who don't know where it's in South America. It's one of the South American areas, and it's sometimes called Latin America. It's part of Colombia. It's part of part of Brazil, Venezuela, and of course, Hugo Chavez, the late Hugo Chavez, talked about the widespread racism in Venezuela. And that's one of the reasons I think he was so endeared by a lot of the black. I've talked to black people who are from Venezuela, and they spoke of him with great reverence because of his stance on some of these issues. Many say that might have been one of the reasons they had him killed or taken out or something. But Mr. Fuller brought up this notion of whites-only enclave in South Africa, resurrecting this notion of apartheid. Well, if you look at where whites and blacks live right now, you functionally have the same system. And then if you look at who controls the economy there, there's no doubt there's this so-called segregation or apartheid or something where one group controls everything. Now, something interesting is I looked around, black pallbearers, a racially charged Lima tradition. And it talks about how black people have been struggling for years in Peru, in Lima, Peru, which is the capital, and talked about how they were brought there, how they've been treated, all the history that they've had to go through. And right now, that stuff has been used. Black pallbearers were used for funerals and stuff like that. They're all absent from Peru's business and political elite. Although slavery was abolished in 1854, only 2% of Peru's blacks go to college. Afro-Peruvians are considered largely to manual labor, including as field hands in sugarcane plantations along the nation's Pacific coast. So, Mr. Fuller, this just adds fuel to what you're talking about. Yet this group accounts for 10% of the 30 million people in this in that area down there, and yet it's almost like it's 1930. It's almost like, and you see that in Brazil, you see that in Colombia, you see that in Venezuela is trying to come up, but it's still essentially there. You see this everywhere on the planet, everywhere you go on the planet. And this is what when I talk to people, I talk to them about you have to see this whole thing worldwide. The condition of black people everywhere on the planet is on the absolute bottom. Everywhere you go, you can document that it's on the bottom. Is that what you mean, Mr. Fuller, by white supremacy?
That's exactly what I mean. And it has to be, since it's so uniform, it has to be by plan. I mean, unless it is true that black people are just automatically bottom people, just by nature, which I do not believe. Now, I choose not to believe that, based on I have seen evidence to the contrary. Because at a very early age, this is basically what I was taught, naturally, in the system of white supremacy. And I sat on the back of the bus for 30 years before I was told that I could come to the front. So I had the view that the white supremacists had put out, that maybe we just are consigned to be nothing people, really not even people, just some kind of things that just move around and bump into each other until somebody grabs us and gives us some kind of direction. And that's all that I saw. That was my experience as a young person. But then I saw symptoms that wasn't so uniform what they were saying, that we were just consigned to be that. And I said, if we were consigned to be that just by nature, then it wouldn't be necessary to put up signs or to even whip us in line. We would just automatically just do the things that are on the bottom. We would always just rush to the bottom of everything and be joyous in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see any real something to substantiate that. So I say this is a system that is imposed on the dark-skinned people. The darker the skin, then that's what's going to happen. And it's done by those white people, not all, but those who have chosen to establish and maintain a royalist system based on color. It's not a novel idea. It's based on the old imperial idea of the emperorship. The king can do no wrong. So somebody thought of the idea of inventing something called racism and or white supremacy, where you just look at a person and say, oh, you have color in your skin. Therefore, you are supposed to be subordinate to people who don't have color in their skin. So you will now be labeled a colored person, a person of color. And the darker that shade is, the darker it is, the more further you're supposed to be down on the scale. Why? Because I said so. And I will classify myself as white, and you will be classified by me as black, and I will classify myself as being a member of the white race, and you will be a member of the quote-unquote black race, and every time I tell you to do something, you hop. And if you don't do it, I'll crack my whip, or I will shoot you, or I will make you uncomfortable in the worst way. And I will set up a whole worldwide system based on that idea. Now, how about them apples? And so the people, evidently, from what I see, from just my reasoning, because I don't know the whole history of how that evolved, but apparently most of the people on the planet must have thought that idea was absurd. You just look at somebody and look at their color and then say that they are eligible to be mistreated because of their color? I mean, that doesn't make sense. So evidently the people who heard of the idea just kind of breezed along with it and say, oh, that's so absurd as not even take seriously. And by not taking it seriously, the people who believed in that and who had adopted that, they made it work in record time. It swept all over the world, and it's still the biggest show on earth. And the evidence right now that it's still the biggest show on earth is that we're having this conversation right now in 2013. That's some evidence right now. Otherwise, we'd be talking about planting tulips or something.
That is so true. But I'm looking at this, this area of the world known as South America. I mean, I could go anywhere in the world, as I said before, and I've had the opportunity to go around a little bit. I haven't been all over the world, but I've had an opportunity to talk to people all over the world, do research, and I've had an opportunity to go to different parts of the world. And the first thing I try to do is wherever I go, where are the folk? Let me see if this concept holds up. Let me see who's running it, and let me see who's on the bottom. And in every occasion, not some, every occasion, this model that you're talking about, Mr. Fuller, holds up. I mean, it literally holds up. Yeah, I mean, even over in India. I just had a friend of mine that came back from India, and I prepped him before he went. So this is what I want you to tell me by the time you get over, the time you get back. Tell me, go to the poorest sections. Go to the sections where people are just obliterated. Then go to the seats of government. Tell me what you see. He came back with the same report, Mr. Fuller. And this is happening everywhere, all over the planet. So it's either, I agree with you, it's either we got to be the dumbest people in the world, born genetically inferior, or either they have to be the smartest people in the world, born genetically superior, or there must be a system in place that keeps people down. It can't go but one or two ways, Mr. Fuller.
That's the way I see it. That's exactly the way that I see it. And I don't see any way to squirm around that argument. And people who are trying to find out, well, it's got to be something else. It's a mystery. We can't quite get it together. And all of the scholars are trying to sit down and scratch their heads and figure out, how did this phenomena come about? I mean, it must be somebody from the moon or from the center of the earth, the creature from the queer lagoon or whatever. I mean, but hey, it's just a system of white supremacy, and it's put together by people. And it's based on the royalist model. That's all it is. All of the evidence points to that. At one time, I mean, white people picked out other white people and say, you don't have blue blood. Now, who's ever seen blue blood? And they say, if you don't have blue blood, then you are not supposed to be in the royal class, and therefore you will be consigned to be a serf. You'll be consigned to be at the bottom of everything all of the time. And I will be a member of the upper class, and you are of the lower class, the oblivion class.
Wow!
And I will name you as such. Now, that worked for a long time, but then a lot of white people said, you keep saying that you're blue blood, and I don't see you having no blue blood, and I don't know what that means anyway. furthermore, I'm not paying any attention to it anymore because I'm tired of this drudgery. So they fought among themselves. But then somebody got the idea, well, look, we're in a pretty big world here, and it's populated by people that don't even look like us. So why not take this royal model and put it on a color basis? And everybody who has color will be subservient, and everybody who doesn't have color will be a king and a queen. How about that model? And they spread that. They ran tests on it, apparently, from the evidence. I wasn't there, but a long time ago, somebody must have run a few tests on it, and it seemed to work pretty well. And so then they tested some more and tested some more. Next thing you know, they were off and running. And it turned out to be the most powerful political and religious idea ever thought of in the minds of people in the history of the world.
Mr. Fuller, I've got Warren from Louisiana. I believe, is it New Orleans or Warren?
Yes, New Orleans.
All right, my brother. You've got a question for Mr. Fuller. Go ahead.
Okay, what a great stimulating conversation, Mr. Fuller and Brother Kahari. My question is, Mr. Fuller, what responsibility do victims of white supremacy have when the concept of justice is applied to them? That is, guaranteeing that no one is mistreated and that those who need help the most get the most constructive help. In other words, it seems as though the victims have become used to being mistreated, and it seems as though if we get the most constructive help, would we be able to exploit or take advantage of the most constructive help? In other words, what would be the responsibilities of the victims when the concept of justice, if is ever applied?
Well, that's just it. We didn't have a concept of justice, and now I had to invent a definition for it, and the definition you just gave. That's something I had to invent because there was no definition, one that made sense to me. They'd have said justice was treating people fairly. Well, fair means white. Okay? My fair lady, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Treat me fairly. I mean, so the white supremacists took the word fair and the word justice and made them one and the same. And the two words don't even sound alike. And then they say that a person has fair skin, which means white, and fair and justice is all the same, but they didn't give a definition to justice. That was a trick. So I manufactured one, I invented one that I think it will hold up until somebody comes up with a better one.
Well, the one they use is invented. I mean, so
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I didn't, when I started looking up the word justice, I couldn't make any sense out of it. So I made up one that I think is more concise, and that is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's part one.
Mm-hmm.
And then part two is guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And you always know that it's constructive help by the result, that nothing destructive happens. And so working with that definition, either when you're on a job or anything, you can just aim for justice. You don't even have to, and I want to mention that to everybody in this audience too. Stay away from talking about racism on the job. All that'll do is generate a lot of hostility for you, even among black people who will get nervous about it. But talk about justice. And if you talk about justice, that will lead to a discussion on racism anyway. So you'll get the complete package, but you won't be accused of the person who brought it up. You won't be accused of being the person who brought it up. You brought about the word justice. Justice is universal. Everybody is for justice according to giving it lip service. But making it practical, everybody runs from it who has power. Okay? Which is why you still have the system of white supremacy. But you say, I just want to guarantee, folks, ladies and gentlemen, when in the beginning of this meeting, what is our objective here at this factory? Well, one thing, other than producing the products, ice cream cones or whatever we're doing here, we want to guarantee that no person is mistreated. Will everybody say amen? That's number one. Number two, we want to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Does anybody have an idea of opposing that? Is there a reason why anyone would be against people needing help, getting the most help? Anybody? Anybody stand up, speak now. And most likely nobody in that room is going to oppose you giving that formula for producing a product called justice. So then you'll say, all right, we're off and running then. So we should work very well here. In total harmony, there should be no discord in this place at all, because everybody has agreed that we are going to have justice on these premises. Now again, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any dissenters in this room or on leave or whatever, let them speak. Evidently nobody's speaking. So we all on board for, along with producing ice cream cones, we're also going to be producing another product, and that product is justice.
Warren, can you stay right there?
Sure.
Okay, stay right there, Mr. Fuller. Stay right there. Everyone, stay right there. If you want to talk to Mr. Fuller, 1-877-932-9766. Stay right there. More to come on Compensatory Concept or TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is Satin, your MC host for the 7th Annual African Village Arts Festival. This is a 3-day village-type event that starts August the 16th, 17th, and 18th in Columbus, Ohio. We are calling for artists, sponsors, vendors, and volunteers. This festival is sponsored in part by Ohio Alliance for Arts Education. Please call 614-252-7525 or 614-252-2430 or email us at info@galleryinthehood.com for more information. See you there.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
TalkTainmentRadio.com. Food for thought.
I guess it's time for us to have that talk with our children on how we should carry ourselves and act in public. If ever there is a feeling of uneasiness about a situation or feeling that something is not right, we should try to exit the area immediately, and if threatened, call 911. Back in the day, parents routinely had that talk, and I guess those days never really left us. I spent my younger years in Sanford, Florida. It was segregated then by law, and it still seems to be in some situations and with some people. I remember family members routinely having conversations on how to act and react in public. Sadly, those conversations need to continue.
That's another Food for Thought. To hear additional Food for Thought, stay tuned to TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard.
Richard Holt, research chemist, University of Rio Grande in southeastern Ohio, which again, you can see your condition. People always wonder how they get it. Don't worry about what you can see, worry about what you cannot see that can cause your condition.
Environment, pollution, affects your skin.
Richard's Remedy is a multi-purpose cream that works on a variety of skin conditions, such as psoriasis,
eczema,
poison ivy,
acne,
poison oak,
and Morgellons disease.
I sell it in a 1-ounce container through the internet for $12.95. There's Visa, American Express, MasterCard, Discover, Money Card, accepted.
At richardsremedy.com. Richards with an S, remedy.com.
RICHARDSREMEDY. richardsremedy.com.
Call 937-607-4259 or go to email info@talktainmentradio.com for a free sample of Richard's Remedy.
Presenting great moments in the history of 1-800-VED-INFO. For years, Americans have turned to 1-800-VED-INFO for government information. Make your own great moment. Call 1-800-VED-INFO. It's government made easy.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
We've got the power.
Justice is better than racism.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard, the world's greatest radio. We are dealing with just racism around the world and all of the ramifications. The shooting death of Trayvon Martin has certainly stirred the population. all over the world, stirred the question and discussion of race everywhere. But the question is, where does it go from here? Jesse Jackson called, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, called the state of Florida apartheid state. Mr. Fuller says white supremacy is all over the world. It's a global system. It's been operating for a while. And if you travel anywhere on the planet, and it's very true, if you even travel within this area called the United States, anywhere on the planet, what you'll see will blow your mind if you have no consciousness of what's going on. You will see everywhere possible. You will see wherever they are side by side, you will see the darkest people, the black people, on the bottom, economically, socially, you name it, any category, health-wise, on the bottom. You'll see the lightest or the whitest people at the top of the total scale. These so-called people who are running things, it's all over the world. Now, people can debate you, they can argue with you, but let's take a walk around the globe and we'll verify it. We'll validate it. I was watching a piece the other night where this guy was supposed to have been, this British guy was supposed to have been hunting some kind of UFO or some kind of Bigfoot. And what was in it, he was over in Malaysia. And what I noticed is that all the people he talked to were the poorest people in Malaysia, and all of them were blacker than me. I mean, they were sure enough black. No question about it. New Orleans black, Brother Warren. I mean, you know, that kind of black. Black, the kind of black you got over in Sudan, all that kind of stuff. They were on the bottom. These were black people who lived in Asia, and they were the poorest and the most decrepit and the most, that was suffering the most. So this is a worldwide condition. Mr. Fuller has called this worldwide condition white supremacy. Now, for those of you who want to debate whether it exists or not, I would recommend you go and look at the planet. Open your eyes and see what's going on. You either come back with 1 or 2 or 3 reasons as to why that exists. And Mr. Fuller has said for years that the reason why it exists is because there's a global system operating. It's been in that way for quite a while, and that black people are having trouble. Mr. Fuller, tell me if I'm right. All over the planet, black people are having trouble trying to decode, figure it out, and understanding how to counter it. Is that correct?
That apparently is correct, because when you talk to black people about a system of white supremacy, they'll just say, "Oh well, yeah, racism is out there." That's usually the expression that is used. Racism is out there. Out where? What are you talking about? Out there? Well, that means it's around. Around where? Well, it's out, around, up, down. What are you talking about? Does racism dominate the people of this planet or not? Yes or no? That's the question. Does it dominate the dark-skinned people of this planet 24 hours a day, everywhere on the planet? Does it exist or does it not? Now, either people, these wild-eyed people, old-school people like Neely Fuller, are making it up, and that what you're looking at is something else. It's an illusion. And people like Neely Fuller, from old school, old back-of-the-bus Negroes, who have just been so indoctrinated, so victimized that they have really just lost their minds and dropped off on the side of the road. Well, yeah. Well, when you take a look, well, just don't believe your lying eyes.
Well, I've seen it everywhere I've traveled. And Brother Warren, I don't know how much traveling you've done, but I can verify that there is, this is the truth. Blacks on the bottom, whites on top. Everywhere you go. Just no denying it. And when you present this to people, they stand there and just go, duh. They have no responses. Brother Warren, let me get your take on this.
Well, I would bring up the issue I called for last time with Mr. Fuller, but I don't want to get into that one. But I want to speak to what Mr. Fuller said about when people say, well, it's out there. But I hear a lot of blacks also, when we talk about the nature of blacks killing blacks, one of the first things people say, well, we got to stop blaming the white man. We got to. What can we do? And I hear that a lot.
I too. I hear that also a lot. Yeah.
The castigation of ourselves for looking at the system of white supremacy, whereby the white supremacists are the captain of the ship. And so I just wanted to add that. I hear people say that as if we're going to.
Let me get Mr. Fuller's. You brought up something very interesting. Let me get Mr. Fuller's response on that. Mr. Fuller, how should we respond when somebody brings up this question of blacks killing blacks? What is an effective response to that?
First order of business is say, how did this come about? Now, because of the system of white supremacy. That's the answer. Now, what do you do about it? Stop doing it. We don't have to do that. And some people will say, well, that's the only way we can make it and whatnot. I mean, we're around black people. We're not around anybody else and whatnot. So if the black person next door has a TV set and I don't have one, I go over there and shoot him and take his. And that's what we have always done. And that's how we're going to do it because, after all, that's the way life is. That's the setup. Well, you just don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. We've got in the habit of doing that. And so step one, according to my recommendations, which is based on logic, I think, since we are so programmed to have that tendency, first of all, we don't deny the truth. We are programmed to do that. Black people are programmed to go out in the street searching, exhaustively, just looking around, trying to, where are the other black people other than me? And then when you see one, I think I see a black person 2 blocks away. Then we gravitate toward that black person, and then the next thing we think about, now that he's coming in view and getting closer, and what do I do now? I kill him. That's what I do. Because that's what we as black people do. We go searching for each other, and then when we find each other, we start shooting. And how did we get in that kind of mindset? I don't know, but that's what we've always done. Now, we need to stop and think about that. Why do we do that? We go looking for black people. The minute we get off from work, we go looking for other black people. And it has been my observation over a period of years, all of us are poisoned. We carry that poison. Now we go searching for each other, carrying that poison. And then when we see each other, we come up with this phony thing of high-fiving and embracing for a few minutes. And then we start finding reasons to start picking at each other. And then that turns out to be gunfire, 9mm popping all over the place. Now, we went searching for each other. Now, this is a result of our search. All right, let's look at it like that. We black people, we don't go looking for white people to hang out with. Truth be told, because they don't want to be bothered with us, because not even our conversations make sense. They're not going to get any power out of conversations with black people. They know that. That's why many of the white commentators right now are being told by black people, well, we got to have a conversation on race. And the white people kind of go silent, and it's understandable that they would. Have a conversation on race in order to benefit who? See, that's the question. And the average white person, truth be told, why should I talk to a black person about anything when there's nothing to be gained other than some trash? Because that's what they talk. I can't gain anything from talking to him, to a black person.
Mr. Fuller, back up with that again. That's very, 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 because you peered into the minds of someone. What do you mean when they're saying there's nothing to be gained?
Well, I'll just start with an incident that happened at Fort Sill back in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
That's an Army base in Oklahoma. I was stationed there. And a black male was walking along having what I call, apparently, I don't know the details of what they were talking about. He was talking along, a black male was walking on the base there with a white lady. And they were having what you might call a pleasant, casual conversation. It wasn't an in-depth conversation. She wasn't like his boss, apparently, telling him what to do, that type of context. It seemed like they were just walking along having what a lot of people would call a normal, casual conversation. And there were two white soldiers standing nearby, and they said it so that everybody could hear it. One of them spoke and said, "It seems like she could find somebody better to talk to." And that immediately registered with me because I knew exactly what he meant. Why is a reasonably sane white woman talking to a black male in 1952 about anything? And for the most part, that philosophy has been carried over into 2013. Because why talk to a person who doesn't have much power, or little or none, doesn't have much future, except that it is dictated by somebody white? Why not go directly to another white person? Why stop along the way talking to someone who's secondary, or third, or fourth, or fifth, or zero? And this is why it sounds kind of absurd when a black male talks to a black female. Black male, as far back as I can remember, a standard question in one way or another. Paraphrase it. "Hey, baby, you want to talk to me?" And the logical question would be, what for? I mean, truth be told, and I'm talking about a black male talking to a black female.
Mm-hmm.
What for? She's the only one with a job. She's rushing past the liquor store trying to get on the bus to get to the job. The black male is standing there in front of the liquor store harassing people. And, "Hey, baby, you want to talk to me?" About what? Our future? Well, good luck with that.
Wow, that's heavy. That is heavy. And I think if you look all over the net, the internet, and especially in those areas where you pretty much know it's being generated in Facebook and places like that, I think you're hitting something, Mr. Fuller. The conversation appears to be what you called zeroistic years ago. I mean,
yes.
There's just no substance to it whatsoever.
Absolutely. Now, they are asking for this conversation. I've been looking at the charges that some of the white people have been making on some of the radio stations, many of the radio stations, and some of the television stations. Black babies out of wedlock. Now, that's a charge. The code always says, the counter-racist code, the code that I'm trying to get started, always says when people make charges, first thing you want to know is not who's making the charge, but is the charge true? And if the charge is against you, first thing you want to do is see if that charge is true. Now, if it's true, just say if it's true, that it is true. Then you start finding out the reasons why it's true. Okay? And then you start making comparisons, because all of justice, if you're going to produce a thing called justice, you got to make comparisons. So just starting with that. There are several charges. We probably won't get a chance to talk about them all this morning. But one of them is black babies out of wedlock. That's what brings on this Trayvon Martin thing. But then when you look at the history of white supremacy, look at all of the white men who have had tons and tons and tons and tons of babies that they have planted in black females. And can you call that wedlock? Nowhere do you see evidence of that. So they come up with this kind of charge against black people? Well, now let's look at the whole history of white men with black females worldwide. And you start talking about making babies. Well, now, let's be honest. If we're going to solve problems using truth now, let's go with the truth. I say that as a closing note to the entire white world just on that alone. Babies out of wedlock, are you kidding?
Wow. Wow, Mr. Fuller, what a closing note. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you real soon. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you.